inherent right to dignity of all people, regardless of their identity. So my presentation is really about Sri Lanka now, right, from 2009 to now. And what I want to do is really break my presentation into three areas. One is talk about the continued militarization in the north and the east. The second is really talk about the refugees and the IDPs, the internally displaced persons. And the third is to talk about the insecurity of women in the north and the east. And if you have really read the report that the crisis group developed not too long ago, pretty much, that's my presentation. So I'll cut it short. If you have read, please let me know. Since the end of the war in 2009, the military budget in Sri Lanka has continued to increase. The budget for 2012 is, the budget of the country for 2012 is $20.1 billion US dollars, and 10% of it, 2.1 billion, is for defense. And half of the defense budget is for the military. And that is double of education and healthcare budget in the entire country. Currently, there are 200,000 active soldiers. Most of them are in the north and the east. Sri Lanka only has 80,000 compared to that police officers, and most of them are in the south. I think beyond militarizing the north and the east, the government is also using the military to enforce, civilian issues, and really to look at some of what's happening in other parts of Sri Lanka. So, for example, Colombo district has 2.5 million people, and Colombo, the city itself, has 1 million people. And the military has been used to evict 75,000 families from their shanty, town areas. And in the north, right now, actually as of 2 weeks ago, is what I've gotten the information from, in an 80-kilometer area, which is about 49 miles, there are 177 military points. These are not checkpoints, by the way. I want to make it clear. But these are, if you go that 80 miles, you will encounter the military 177 times, okay? So I'm talking about bunkers, military personnel, jeeps, access stopped vehicles, not necessarily, I'm not talking about vehicles that are passing. So that is a pretty intense militarized area. And most stores which are, around on either side of the street in these areas are also run by the military. Hair salons, grocery stores, bookstores, toy stores. The military is not in uniform, but these are operated, all the shops are operated by the military. And the civil administration in the north and the east is also run by the military. All new development projects are run by the military. And the offshore drilling that's taking place off of Mana and the Kankasantare cement factory that most of the people who are here might remember are both currently run by the military. So let's go to the refugees and the IDPs. There are actually very few refugees who are really held in Manik Farm at present. There are 2,500 refugees in Manik Farm right now. Few compared to the large numbers that we had during the last couple of years. Please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this name. The 2,500 refugees, they are from the Nandikadal area. That's where I think the last fighting took place. The battle between the Sri Lankan government forces and the LTTE. This area still people are unable to access unless you're with the military or the military has access at the present time. Of those who are released, 150,000 to 175,000 refugees have returned to their own original residence. 280,000 are still displaced, which means that they have not returned to their original home. They are living with family, they are living with friends, and perhaps some of them don't want to go back. In the east, where the Batticlo area, IDPs, internally displaced people, are still living in schools. These were the people who were displaced because of the high security zones. And I remember in 2006, they were also in that particular school and in camps, and they continue to reside there. There is a resettlement of IDPs in Valley Oya. These are predominantly the Sinhala displacement, people who were displaced during the war, who are resettled and continue to be resettled right now. There's also a resettling of former military personnel there and their families that originally belonged to Tamils, where the Tamils were living. Tamils are given the land in Mana that originally belonged to the Muslims, who were expelled by the LTTE. So it is, you have to think about it in the way is, now Tamil women, because most of them are women these days who are heads of households, are given little plots of land. Okay? And the Muslim IDPs are now returning finally 25 years later to recognize now the area is taken by the Tamils. So there's a tension right now that's growing within the communities that the politicians are really not taking care of, because if people who were writing the land to the Tamils already knew that the land belonged to the Muslims. But nothing is being done at present. The government is not really building homes for Tamil refugees. They have structures to live in with no doors or toilets. Every hut has about 4 to 5 pictures of those who have died. These pictures of the dead are what they have as assets at the moment. The Indian government is expected to build homes for the Tamils. The World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and foreign embassies have given funding to the Sri Lankan government, which actually goes into the defense budget, because the Ministry of Defense is now Ministry of Defense and Urban Development. The community also has no access to psychological treatment. There's one doctor that's well known with a few trained nurses, and they're all in hospitals, and it's actually a team of about 6 nurses. You have to think about it in a cultural context where mental health is not something one talks about or seeks help. So right now, I think there's an effort by some of the medical professionals to really seek funding to train people so that people can actually go to people's homes. Funding for mental health just after the war was extremely difficult. There was actually a very clear message sent not to fund any programs that related to mental health, which meant that some of the funding that we had to do for Sri Lanka had to go to local organizations, and I'm not quite sure how they refunded it for healthcare. And also some of the organizations in Sri Lanka that were actually led by mainly Sinhalese in the western province, in Colombo, their offices were broken into, and their computers were checked to see where the funding was going and who was doing treatment. The right to livelihood does not really exist, for some of these Tamil refugees. You have to think about it that the only skill they had was to deal with war for close to 30 years. So now that they are in one place without running, right, they really do not have the skills to be able to have a job, keep a job, and maintain normalcy. And I think it's really important to recognize that it's not just the end of a war. At the end of a war necessarily bring about peace. We have to consciously and deliberately engage in reconciliation and peace in order to really have a harmonized country.